I guess we're on.
Yeah.
Steven, good to see you.
Hey, thanks, Ray, for having me. Great to be here.
Thanks for taking the time.
Anytime.
Hey, we're here live with Steven Hachey. He's managing partner of XL Title. You also have a law firm as well for all the sticky stuff. I figured we just kick off some general knowledge here today for people. I was just trying to think about it. You know, when the first house that we ever bought, Deb and I didn't actually know how to title it as a married couple. I didn't know, you know, all of those different things. What's the best way to title? You're a married couple, you don't have a trust or anything like that.
Yeah, the best way to title it's called tenants by the entireties. What that simply means, it's only ownership. It's the only type of ownership available to married couples. Meaning that if you're single, you cannot own property by the entireties. Essentially, what that provides does several things. One, if one spouse were to pass away, the property automatically goes to the other spouse without any probate or any order determining homestead. So it's very advantageous if one spouse to pass away.
Right.
Also, it offers creditor protection. For instance, if one spouse gets into a car accident and ultimately gets sued for injuring someone, the creditor of one spouse can't go after the property owned by both spouses as tenants by the entireties.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's the new knowledge today.
There you go.
Excellent. And then also on general knowledge, what I was thinking was we could talk about contracts a little bit without going too nitty gritty. What would be like in today's contracts, today's purchase contracts? Are there any kind of flaws in it that we need to protect our clients with? Anything that we need to oversee a little closer?
Absolutely. The two main concerns that we see that happen to our realtor partners are, one, we got to be very careful in regards to the inspection time frame. Now, for instance, the standard inspection time frame for an as-is contract is 15 days. Quite often we see that shortened to even 7 and 10 days. And our realtor partners need to know that ultimately, if something pops up on the inspection during those 7 days, they have to alert the other agent immediately, and ultimately they either need to get an extension of the inspection period to give additional time for the parties to negotiate who's going to make that repair, or ultimately they've got to send over a cancellation, or ultimately get the other side to agree to make that repair. Have to be really careful. A lot of agents just simply say, if someone pops up in the inspection period, they'll email the other agent saying, hey, we noticed a leak in the plumbing. But if they don't take that a step further, then ultimately once that inspection time frame runs out, that contract further solidifies. So that's one area of.
So for layman, if they do 7 days, they got to have everything resolved within the 7 days, not just the inspection.
7 days is really aggressive. It's a really aggressive time frame. But ultimately, that time frame can be extended as long as both parties agree.
Right. Okay.
That's one area of concern on the contract. The other area of concern that we typically see is disputes regarding the financing contingency. Ultimately, in the contract, it says the buyer must make a good faith effort to apply for a loan within a 5-day period. And a lot of times, if there comes down to it, and there's the buyer's financing denied, the first thing the seller is going to do is reach out to the buyer's agents, ask for proof to make sure that buyer did apply for the financing within that 5-day period. The proof can be simply emails from a mortgage broker. It could be a loan application. That's where we see the main dispute as far as did the buyer actually uphold the terms of the contract in regards to the financing contingency. So
what would hold up in a court of law then? What would be sufficient to?
I've seen just simple emails from the buyer to their mortgage broker saying, hey, we want to apply for a 30-year loan over with the best interest rate we can get. That's enough to at least show good faith effort that the buyer has kickstarted the process. So.
Okay.
Another kind of along the financing contingency lines as well, you have to be really careful as far as the loan approval. Most contracts require that loan approval to be obtained within 30 days. And essentially, if the loan approval isn't obtained within the 30 days, then the contract can be bound, and ultimately the buyer could lose their escrow deposit if the loan is denied after that 30-day loan approval period. So on the same lines of the inspection, if a buyer is running up into issues with getting the lender to approve the loan in 30 days, the buyer's agent needs to reach out directly to the other side and ask for an extension of that period. So especially in today's market, which is is on fire right now.
Right.
What we're seeing from a title company and a law side is that lenders are backed up. I mean, 30 days to approve a loan is very difficult because interest rates are at an all-time low. There's a lot of new purchases as well as a lot of refinances. So ultimately, the lenders are getting kind of slammed from both ends.
Yeah. And same with the inspections, like you said, to try and do a 7-day inspection right now, they're overloaded. So your advice would be just to give a little bit more grace period around these things.
Yeah, I don't really recommend. I mean, I think 10 would be the minimum I recommend. I wouldn't go lower than 10. And ultimately, even per contract, 15. But from a seller's point of view, I mean, ultimately, that's where the give and take is. I mean, from a seller's point of view, you want the buyer to do the inspection as quickly as possible because ultimately, that's one less reason the buyer can jump out of the contract. Because as you know, in the standard as is residential contract, the buyer can cancel the contract in their sole discretion within that 7 to 10 or 15-day inspection period. So it says sole discretion. So if they simply a buyer has a change of heart because they don't like the paint colors on the wall, or they don't like the school districts, or whatever it may be, they can cancel the contract and get a full return to their escrow. So the more time you give them as a seller, the more time they have to decide to back out or to take the problem.
Well, and the longer it's been off the market too. So
yeah, very, very good point. And we're seeing a lot of contracts too. I mean, where buyers are asking for 60-day closes. And from a seller point of view, I would be very concerned about that, because the more time you give a buyer to close on the property, the more things that can happen. Recently we had a buyer with a 60-day close. The lender didn't order the appraisal until day 45, and next thing you know, the property didn't appraise out. Now the seller kind of felt squeezed. They had two options: either lower the purchase price to the appraised price, or put the property back on the market. But at that point, the property had already been off the market 45 days, so it really wasn't a good situation, either way for the seller.
So that brings up a question then. So say it's the standard 30 days. The appraisal should be executed within the 30-day financing contingency, or is that accurate?
Yeah, I recommend it. We've actually taken the additional steps of writing additional language in the contract that the buyer agrees to press or ultimately the lender orders the appraisal. Back in 2006, 2007, 2008, a buyer could go out and hire their own appraiser. We'll do all the foreclosures and mortgage fraud and et cetera, et cetera. Now the lender has to pick the appraiser. What we're doing though is we want what I like to do is ultimately, especially on a contract that has a longer closing date, we like to basically request or require that the buyer contact their lender to order the appraisal to occur within the same time frame as the inspection period, and that way the seller is not holding the bag if all of a sudden the appraisal comes in at a lower price. Because right now the market's on fire, but just because the market's on fire doesn't mean that that appraisers are increasing increasing the values of the properties. They're not keeping up with it. Sometimes, that is a big issue, is that ultimately when there's a lot of demand, you may have a bidding war, 10 buyers want to buy one piece of property, and then ultimately, and they keep outbidding themselves, but ultimately it's up to the appraiser to determine what the purchase price or what the fair market value of the property is, because ultimately if the appraiser determines the fair market value of the property to be lower than the purchase price, the lender's not going to loan the money, and it creates huge issues.
Right. So do you suggest the appraisal contingency on any of those purchase contracts?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. You want it spelled, especially from a buyer's point of view, you want it specifically spelled out, because the financing contingency portion of the as-is contract is there's kind of a gray area as far as the appraisal goes. So I always recommend using that separate appraisal contingency addendum. And actually within that addendum, you can state, all parties can give a deadline for when that appraisal must occur.
Yeah, that would give it a lot more structure. I'd say there's always that little bit, and I think there's some realtors out there that think that in the financing contingency they're covered on the appraisal, but that's not the case, is it?
Not the case, correct.
Yeah. So what would be, you see all kinds of contracts coming through, what would be the most common mistakes maybe that realtors make, if there's a couple that we could center out in a contract?
Kind of the most, make sure all boxes are checked. We see a lot of contracts that just boxes are missing, they're checked, and it can create, one simple box checked here or there can create thousands of liability in regards to who's paying for what. For instance, there's a box in regards to who pays for assessments. Now, those assessments aren't like HOA assessments or condo association assessments. They're like, especially in Pasco County, they have what they call road paving assessments. Right. And ultimately, if you don't check that box, it's not clear who's paying for those assessments at closing. And ultimately, the same factor as far as the title insurance as well. Either the buyer or the seller can pay for the owner's policy and select the closing agent. And ultimately, if that box not checked, I mean, that's a couple $1,000s that could really affect the deal either way. So.
Right, it should be part of the discussion when you're negotiating the deal, anyways. That
absolutely, home warranty is another one. We see it not checked. Are they offering and not offering it? So I think that's the big. I'm surprised by the amount of contracts we receive with that aren't thoroughly reviewed and all boxes checked and marked on who's responsible for what closing costs. Also, I mean, the main thing too we see a lot in regards to buyers and sellers. Who contributes what to closing costs? I mean, what's the standard? Is there an average? Who pays what? And when you speak closing costs, I mean, there's also kind of some confusion. You've got separate closing costs. You've got closing costs for the real estate purchase itself, and the buyer also has their closing costs as well, which are in regards to the loan. They're going to have to pay, prepaid insurance. They may have to pay PMI. They may have to pay advanced real estate taxes. They may have to pay a mortgage loan origination fee. I mean, there's a lot of different closing costs. So that can also kind of create some, angst on who's contributing what or who's responsible for what closing costs.
Yeah, and then you've got the contribution limits with the lenders and different things, or the programs, let's say FHA versus conventional and things like that. So
absolutely, yeah,
definitely they can get a lot of help to get in a new home.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's why they contact Ray, and they contact you and your wife, and ultimately, your T's are crossed and I's are dotted, so they know they're in good hands once they hire the Turner team. No doubt about it.
I appreciate that. So what are you seeing in the marketplace? It seems to be pretty lively out there. You guys are really busy as well?
Absolutely. I think the COVID situation, ordinarily the spring to summertime is our busiest time of year because people want to buy and sell prior to going back to school. Obviously with the COVID situation, I think it just kind of compacted the buying season, and now it's even extended it due to the historically low rates. Ordinarily, our busiest time is March, April, June, July. March and April, due to the situation, we're a little slow. But come June, July, August, and we're still seeing a very heavy volume of files. I think it'll continue, on through August and September, especially with the back to school situation and the e-learning, the remote teaching. I think it'll definitely have an impact. And we're also seeing a big impact, not even sellers or buyers and sellers with children, but we're seeing a lot of big impact of which I'm sure you're seeing as well. People relocating from the Midwest, from New York, from New Jersey. We've seen it. We've definitely seen an uptick, from those areas over the past couple of years. But I mean, this year has really been, almost record-setting the amount of people that are moving from those areas down to Florida. So.
Well, where do you want to be quarantined? Up in the miserable cold or down where the palm trees are, right? I think that really spoke clear this time. And then the taxes and everything else. So we're definitely, it is fun listening to it though, because it makes us appreciate what we have here. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard even pool builders the other day are having record numbers because everyone that owns a property here in Florida, and they want to put a pool so they can stay at home and enjoy the sunny weather down here. So
yeah, that's true. Got a buddy in the same business, and he's putting bids out there, and he says, "I'm getting 90% of the bids. It's just craziness out there." So
absolutely,
everybody's.
And I think a lot of people, values have gone up. Rates are down, so it's a good time to refinance, get into a lower rate. If you're opting to stay put versus selling. It's also a good time to sell because ultimately, if you've got a very hot, if you need to, whether you're downsizing or you need more room, it's a great time because ultimately you're going to get more bang for your buck, at a 3% or a sub 3% interest rate than you would, virtually any time over the past, 25 years. Like I said, it's historically low. So you get more bang for your dollar. That ultimately, the lower the rate, the lower your payment, and it can have a pretty big effect on that monthly payment rate. So your affordability and the amount people can afford has gone through the roof, which in turn has helped generate higher prices for our sellers as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good environment. I mean, I I can't. I find it hard to buy into the bubble bursting here. It's just in a different environment than before the magic formula that we had before the Great Recession.
Absolutely, and you're seeing a lot of new home sales as well, right? I mean, that's really taken off, I think.
Right.
Especially down in your area.
Well, I mean, there's a true demand. There's a true demand this time. I mean, the last challenges we had in real estate and everything, it was a false demand, right? And we had an oversupply of houses, not an undersupply like we do right now. So, and with this migration coming in, baby boomers wanting to get down this way, it's really helping.
Well, I think too, the ability to have employers allow to work from home. In areas such as Lakewood Ranch, which I know you do a lot of business in. There isn't a ton of industry in that Lakewood Ranch area, but because now more people can work from home, they're able to enjoy the benefits of that community and kind of maybe move away from the big city life and in a small suburban community and eliminate any commute to work. So I mean, it's really that's opened up the whole work from home has opened up a whole new ballgame in regards to buyers wanting to buy new construction in the areas they want to buy it in. So.
Yeah, and I think people have found that they're actually quite productive at home. It works for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess we're running out of time here, so I guess we'll wrap it up. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us today. It was very informative. We'll bring you back on again. We'll get this thing rolling.
Yeah, anytime. You guys got a great idea and a great concept here. I wish you guys the best.
Thank you, and have a great weekend.
All right, you too, sir. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.